Hey, it's Jegant Drago here, and I wanted to dive a little bit outside of the game about the voting theories that we have in our world and how it relates to the voting system in Helldivers, and it's a little bit interesting. I won't reference anything real in the real world, it's just the theories. And if you listen to the theories and you come to your own conclusions about what it's referencing to, that is your own pathway. I'm not talking about those things. I'm just gonna focus on the theories and how it somehow relates to Helldivers. And then later on, we'll talk about how it could be really interesting about the satire of the game to expand on the voting system and maybe include in the commanders into the voting system as well. So let's get into it real quick. So first we'll get into the democracy station. So we have the locations, okay? So the first theory that we will be looking into was the conformity and the majority influence. So this person named Solomon asked, his experiment demonstrated that individuals often conform to the majority opinion, even when it's objectively incorrect. So putting back into Helldivers, that sometimes in the voting system with the DSS, added that we are able to see the percentage right now, is that people will simply conform to the highest percentage vote just because it's the highest percentage vote. Now things might get a little bit chaotic if there is 0% or no percentage can be seen, and people will have to think for themselves to where they want to bring the DSS, causing the vote to be more spread out. And this will be an interesting experiment. I'm making this video because it's such an interesting opportunity for Arrowhead to be able to sort of compare the voting system that they put inside the game for us and other researchers to see how people act. So right now, the current system is that we get to see the percentage, and with this theory is that people would naturally conform to the highest percentage, even though it might be objectively wrong. A lot of streamers would say, oh, don't go to, right now it's Tarsh example, they should have gone to this other location. But since Tarsh example has the highest vote, a lot of people will keep on voting on to the same planet. So that is the first theory. And so we move on to the second theory, the bandwagon effect. So this is a psychological phenomenon that describes how individuals tend to adopt behavior. So it's a style or choices because everyone else is doing it. So this is also the same idea that because we can see the percentage, we tend to sort of just bandwagon to and vote for that highest percentage because everyone is already doing it, and so people would just sort of lean to vote for the same thing as well. So it basically explains how the majority influence the individual decisions. So, and then there is the critiques of democratic voting and herd behavior. So this is a economic theory of democracy. So Anthony Downs, so he argued that individuals often abstain from voting because they feel their single vote is unlikely to influence the outcome. So this is sort of the opposite idea of people would not come to the DSS and give a vote because they feel like their vote isn't being counted, or there's no point if, let's say, for example, let's say I knew that Akamar is the correct answer, but since it's 28%, there's no point in me voting because Tarch is already 53%. So why even bother coming out to vote? I'll just go and play my game and not participate in the voting system at all. So this is that kind of theory. And then there is the loss aversion and futility. So this explains how people are more sensitive to potential loss than gains. So in voting, this can lead to abstention of individuals feel their choices also have no chance of winning. So it's just it's a different theory by a different person that sort of claims something similar. So in a way, because they feel like they're gonna lose anyways, they just choose not to vote. So it's a little bit different. This is sort of not wanting to lose compared to not feeling that your vote isn't counted properly. Okay, and then the last one that I'll talk about is the pluralistic ignorance and spiral of silence. So this is people wrongly assume their private beliefs differ from the majority, leading them to conform outwardly. So for me, this was a little bit confusing. So an example would be, let's say a teacher asks at the end of the classroom, he'll ask any questions, and then no one raised their hands. Now, it's not because everyone understands the teacher's lecture, but because everyone falsely assumes that everyone else understands already, and they don't want to raise their hand in fear that they might look dumb. So in this situation is that everyone sort of stays confused together silently. So this is, I leave this one for last because I'm not entirely sure how this might sort of apply within Helldivers, because this might require some form of communication and people assuming the same thing even though they might be wrong. So a little bit of more example is that people vote for a planet that they don't really support, but they still vote for it because they think everyone else is like them. So it's sort of conforming to what they assume is everyone else's idea. So here it is an opposite to loss aversion. Loss aversion is they don't vote because they don't want to lose once choosing it. And then here the pluralistic ignorance is that they pick the option they think everyone else is going to pick because they want to pick what is going to win, even though that option it might be the bad option. So people are voting based on what is winning. Now, this might only apply if all of the votes are anonymous and we don't see the percentage, and some people's true nature is to not then critically think which planet is actually best, but they're gonna guess which planet everyone else is going to guess. And so they're not really critically thinking what is the best strategy anymore. They just want to vote and guess where everyone else is voting for. Now there's another interesting situation going on, which is the voting of the city. Is a drama around a week or so back where if I remember correctly, the term new name Bernard was maybe winning, and there was like a rally cry for the different YouTubers made videos to rally cry for the New York Supreme. And now it seems that New York is in the lead. So it is a interesting shift in voting where people have maybe gone for Bernard because it's like a bandwagon effect and they just thought it was a joke. And then because people might not be voting as much for a certain period of time because they felt like Bernard was already gonna win, but thanks to the rally cry of the YouTubers and their fan base to not give up and sort of keep voting for New York Supremes, New York Supreme is now on top, at least for right now when making this video. So I said that I wanted to bring up a couple other ideas about voting, and it would be about the propaganda commanders, where the propaganda commanders here could sort of participate in the selection of the voting option. And this would go into the satire. It would lean towards the satire of the game a little bit. So we have our Super Earth government, and that can be seen as Joel. It can be seen as Arrowhead themselves doing the whole thing, and then the propaganda commanders are like the electives under them, and then those guys will be the one to sort of help select locations. And so those propaganda commanders still represents the people as elected individuals, and so they will help choose locations for the player base. Now, with the satire leaning aspect is that we have votes for us to choose. The satire of the game is that the votes don't matter too much. There's not a real choice to begin with. And hypothetically, if the propaganda commanders all then agree that everyone should go to this location, then the vote would then, options might just be skewed to one location. Or maybe a couple propaganda commanders think that, oh, we should go to a different location, and so the options get fewer than just a little bit more than just one. So it can be a very interesting thing that sort of shifts up and down, where if it's very focused, everyone agrees to go to one place, and the votes don't matter. You're just basically picking one spot. And then when there's like more than one opinion of where to go, then there's more options to choose from, and then it's more dynamic, and it sort of leans towards this satire of the game where votes don't really count as far as the lower players go. And I think it's just interesting, again, in the satire aspect. There's a lot of sacrifices done on the freedom of players aspect. So I get it if this is a bad idea, but I just want to talk about it. Anyways, that's it for the discussion about voting theories and how it applies to Arrowhead and Helldivers. And I think there's some changes that Arrowhead could do with the voting system to collect more data and give like a interesting scientific report on how gamers vote in this game. With that said, I'll see you all next time.